Is everybody in? Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The ceremony is about to begin.
Good morning, all. Let me try that again. Good morning, all. How are we doing? Very quickly rattle through the chat. Who have we got? Vijesh has just joined us. I think Vijesh is one of our newcomers. Thank you very much indeed for being here. As regular viewers will tell you, you arrive in the chat for the first time and you get some welcome confetti. As soon as I can find it, it is there. On a different computer, which is why we've got a changed angle today. But thank you very much indeed for being here, Vijesh. Hope you enjoy the show. Who else is here? Nick Drew is in the house. Morning, Nick. Now we've got a problem. The confetti won't go away. There we go. Killed that. Who else is here? I think first off the mark was Gary Muirhead. Morning, Gary. Thank you for joining us on a Saturday morning. Al Grierson's here as well. The end of the working week for Al Grierson, so he's in the house as well. Nigel Williams is here as well. And good morning, Nigel. I actually recommended that Steve Williamson go and listen to your podcast last night. So if you gain a new subscriber, you'll know exactly why. And Gary Muirhead has just said, happy Saturday, everybody. Yeah, happy Saturday indeed. And Mark Whiting's here as well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. For those of you that have not been here before, no script, no agenda. We will make it up as we go along. But we've left yesterday's show talking about the subject of the lack of personal responsibility within the construction industry. Everything is somebody else's problem. Everything is somebody else's fault. And one of the things that occurred to me, and it didn't occur to me when I first heard about this. So very quick good morning. There we are. There's Jim Turner. Morning, Jim. Thank you very much indeed for being here. And there is Nigel Williams. New episode up shortly. I'll be looking forward to seeing that, or hearing that, should I say. Yeah, personal responsibility. So a couple of years ago, I reported on the fact that a UK demolition company, in fact, it was a London-based demolition company, had taken it upon themselves to put suntan or sunscreen on their sites. Now, my initial thought with that, I'm just going to put some music behind this because I'm sounding very loud in my own ears at the moment. Hope that's not too loud for anyone. Yeah, I'm just going to say a very quick good morning. I'm going to guess that is Gary Muir. Not Gary Muir, that's Gary Major. Happy Saturday, Mark. Good to see you again. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Now, so yes, sunscreen. So here we are. Let's assume that everybody here assembled goes on holiday to Spain or Italy or Greece or Turkey or whatever it might be. And you pop along to somewhere dead sunny and you either buy here and take with you or you buy when you arrive suntan lotion to protect you from the harmful rays from the sun. We all know that. We all know that the sun can cause skin cancer. We also know that sunburn hurts like a swine and therefore we go and buy suntan lotion. But apparently the moment that you step foot on a demolition or construction site, the care of your skin becomes the issue for becomes an issue for your employer. Why is that? Nigel Williams says, I've been talking about personal responsibility for a while now, not just an issue in the construction industry, but a massive problem across the whole of society. Yeah, and I do think, I mean, I mentioned this yesterday, I think we've bought into the American scheme of where there's blame, there's a claim. And therefore we tend to hand off responsibility for just about every aspect of our life. When I was with Ollie Guns earlier this week, he actually said, you know, where do I see things ending up? And I actually, if anybody's seen the film Wall-E, where people, big fat people, are basically spoon-fed because they're too lazy and too stupid to do anything for themselves, it's kind of where we're headed. You know what? I mean, for example, and despite all that I said yesterday about the fact that there are some construction applications, particularly early doors when you're working on a fresh site and there's nothing or anyone anywhere near you, why are we wearing hard hats? That's one issue. But we have a workforce who have to be regularly told to put on their hard hat, to put on their glasses, their gloves, their boots, their high vis. If they're using wearables as some sort of accident prevention, they have to be reminded to do that. They then have to have a toolbox talk that reminds them to do the very thing that they've been doing for years. They then have to have specific safety instruction. Why? What? And I mentioned this yesterday, and as I said yesterday, I always feel uncomfortable about talking about this because it sounds like I'm calling the industry stupid, which I'm certainly not. But is our selection of the people that we have working in our midst a partial cause of this? If we are taking people that have done poorly at school, let's call it that, and there will be a variety of reasons, dyslexia and problems at home. I fully appreciate that. So set all that to one side. But if they've proven to be very poor at taking instruction during their schooling, are they really likely to be suddenly miraculously transformed to people that will follow the very letter of the law? They'll need to be told once, and they will follow those rules from there on in. Personally, I don't believe so. Let's have a look. I get the point about personal responsibility and completely agree on PPE, but if you're working outside all day, I bet your sunscreen bill could get a bit high, not cheap stuff. No, it's not. I realise this is going to extremes, and I don't want to get into an argument here. Would you expect your employer to pay for your toothpaste? Gum disease is a thing. We all know that decent toothpaste will help overcome that. Why are we not expecting our employers to pay for that? Is that not the same thing? Al Grierson says, people are terrible at understanding risk. We have no clue what risk means, which is why people are less afraid of getting in a car than getting on a plane. It's bizarre, that, isn't it? Yeah. People who drive without a seatbelt are absolutely confident they will never get into an accident. Do you know that's one of the things that I find really strange about this? I mean, I have never driven without a seatbelt, and that's not. I learned to drive a car and was given my driving license when it was a legal requirement to wear a seatbelt. If I get in a car now and I don't have a seatbelt on, something feels wrong. And surely that should be the same on a construction project. You know, if you're in an excavator, you should be wearing a seatbelt, and you know, if you're not, does it not feel strange? More people should be shown the gate if they can't fall in line. Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, the problem we have here is, despite what everyone says about the fact that we regularly eject people and blacklist people that we don't take a shine to, or that are seen as troublemakers or rabble rousers or whatever it might be, we are still in the midst of a skill shortage. And I do wonder if employers sometimes are too willing to tolerate those that don't fall into line purely because they'd be hard to replace. Nigel Williams says, I was on a major motorway project last week. There was a stern talking to given out for PPE violations. No more second chances now. Off-site and banned from the project. Yes, it's extreme, but it has to happen. Yeah, yes, it does. I'm just going to say a very quick good morning to Owen Jepson, who has just joined us. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Owen. Not sure if you've been here before, and just to be absolutely... just to cover myself, there is your welcome confetti. That is all for you, Owen. Thank you very much indeed for turning up. Hope you enjoy the show. Let's have a look. Yeah, going back to the point that Nigel made there. Those are the rules. Those are the rules. I use an extreme example, given that we've just been talking about cars. We drive on one side of the road. We don't want people driving on the other side of the road. Those are the rules, and we all abide by them. So why, when we set foot on site, do we decide? I know the rules say hard hats and high vis and gloves and glasses and boots, but no, not for me, thanks. I'm not going to bother with that. Shouldn't be tolerated. I see less idiots getting sacked these days. People just keep moaning about them, and they just keep ignoring them. Yeah, absolutely. And the one point that I will come back to on this is, and I mean this more specifically in demolition, partly because it's the bit I know best, because obviously there are specific hazards within the demolition industry. But one of my concerns with that is your very well-being and possibly your life rests in the hands of those around you. And if you've got somebody working alongside you who has decided that the rules don't apply to them, they are putting you at risk every bit as much as they are putting themselves at risk. Why is that being tolerated? The same goes for hard hat, sunscreen, etc. Yeah, I totally agree. Let's have a look at Gary Muirhead. Says, what does Gary Muirhead say? I remember talking to a guy who worked at a concrete batching plant who took his employee to court for having dermatitis because of the cement. His employer's lawyer said we supplied him with all the PPE, and his lawyer said, but did you make sure he was wearing them? And he won his case. All of which goes back, I'm just going to say a very quick good morning. My mate Peter Haddock's in the house. Morning, Peter. Good work at the Exec Hire Show. I couldn't keep up with all that you were doing, but well done, Peter, and thank you for covering the show as well as you did. This goes back to a point that I made yesterday about, I wish I could remember exactly, but I'm fairly sure it was the access platform company, Genie, who pulled out of the US market because somebody had broken into a site, had started one of their machines up, and had chopped their own arm off. And the person that lost their arm, despite the fact that they'd broken in illegally and were trespassing, they sued both the contractor and the manufacturer of the access platform and won. All the time that's going on, the thing is entirely skewed. And I think half of our problem, as I said earlier, is we are following the American model. Where there's a blame, there's a claim, and we've got ambulance chasing solicitors who will be more than happy to take up your case and fight it in a court of law. But did anyone make sure he was wearing the PPE? I mean, bear in mind we've had a recent rule change in the UK whereby if you're an employer, and this applies also to agency workers, you are required to supply them with PPE. Are we at the point now where an employer is going to have to pop round the house of every employee to make sure they've remembered to put their pants on in the morning, or they've got their shoes on the right feet, or their socks match? It's an absolute lunacy, honestly. Nigel Williams, funny you should say that, Mark. After 25 years in the game, I actually feel naked without my seatbelt on. Yeah, of course. And to the point where, as I say, I literally get in the car, and I feel it more when I'm a passenger. I get in the car, and as I sit down, I reach over my shoulder, pull the seatbelt, clip it in. When I get in as a passenger, which I don't do particularly often, but when I get in as a passenger, I sit down and think, this feels weird. There's something, I know, it's the seatbelt. Let's have a look. Owen Jepson says, I have. I'm not entirely sure what you have, but that's the problem with these conversations. They're a bit sort of spaced out. Let's have a look. Steve Williamson. Good morning, Steve, by the way. I was on a site and was told I had to wear safety glasses and hard hat in the machine. I'm going to go back to exactly what I said yesterday. There is a reason you're being told to wear safety glasses and hard hat in the machine. It's not for your safety, because you've got a Rops cab sat over you that will protect you way, way more than a hard hat ever will. And you've got a front screen that is probably armoured glass that will protect your eyes way, way better than your safety glasses ever will. The way that this works is that somebody on high, be it the contractor themselves, the client, the site manager, has decided I can't be bothered to differentiate between those that are working where they could get hit on the head or they could have something go in their eyes, and those that aren't. So instead of that, I would just say everybody on the site must wear safety glasses and a hard hat at all times, even when it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And I mean, I've written a column. This would be my Monday column because I was a bit up in arms about it yesterday. Imagine a house builder has got a plot of land, And the plot of land is basically an empty field. It's a totally empty field. There's not a road serving it. There are no trees overhead. There are no buildings nearby. It's just an empty field, 4 acres of grass. That's all it is. But the moment that is declared a construction site, you are required to wear a hard hat. The only thing that is likely to hit you on the head on that site at that point in time is poop from a bird that you've displaced by your arrival. That's it. Do we need hard hats to prevent the being hit by bird poop? I don't believe we do. By sacking someone every now and then, it keeps the others on their toes. It's human nature for us as a species to do what we can get away with. Yes, it is. For those of you, I'm going to come back to Peter Haddock's comment in a minute. By sacking someone every now and then, there is a Friends episode. I don't know if anybody ever watched the series Friends, but there is an episode in which the character Joey, who is an actor, actually plays a waiter. So he is basically doing that so that he can be sacked in order for the chef to get control of the rest of the staff. Maybe we should have that. Maybe that should be part of an apprentice's job. Your first job is to arrive on this site to be sacked within the first 2 hours of arriving, just to keep everybody else on their toes. Peter says, look what happened to you on that demolition site when you were in a safe area. Yeah. Look what happened. I got a whack on the head. It's bizarre that we're still having these conversations about wearing PPE. The sites I worked on in the 1990s required PPE, and PMs would send us as contractors off-site if we didn't comply. 100%. But here's the thing. We have, to my mind, I think we have over-focused on it. And I'll give you an example. About 5 years ago, I was asked to shoot a video on a site, and I agreed that I would shoot the video on the site, but at the same time, they agreed that I could shoot something for myself on the site. So imagine a demolition project is going on about 200 meters behind me. It's blurred. It's there. I just wanted to prove that I was on a demolition site, and part of the idea that I had for the video was that I would take my hard hat off, throw it up in the air and catch it, and then walk past the camera. We had complaints about that because everybody is so fixated on it. I was actually, as I say, a good 200 meters away from the actual the demolition work. I was in a car park. I was in a car park that was past a bank of site offices where people were milling around, having a fag, having a morning cup of coffee, none of them wearing hard hats. I was in a car park, but I had complaints. You should be setting a better example. You're on a demolition site, not wearing a hard hat. No, I'm in a bloody car park. Owen Jepson says a lot of the rules and regs nowadays are because of the idiots that have done things. Common sense goes out the window. Yes, it certainly does. And I think, excuse me, I'm just going to have a quick slurp. Oh, excuse me, that's better. And I think this comes back to this whole notion of personal responsibility. I think we have mollycoddled and wrapped in cotton wool and bubble wrap the industry, or the industry's workers, for so long that they now don't think for themselves, or a large swathes of them don't think for themselves. They just turn up, and there are risks here, but the employer will take care of it. It's sunny and I might get sunburned. The employer will take care of it. Something might hit me on the head. I haven't brought my hard hat with me, but the employer will take care of it. And it just goes on and on and on. Let's have a look. Gary Muirhead says seatbelts in the cab should be automatic. If you do it every time you get in the cab, it'll be second nature. Of course it will. Of course it will. Precisely the same as I said about getting in a car. I feel half naked in a car without a seatbelt on. Steve Williamson, that's why health and safety and other regulations are so strict with everything, because of these idiots that don't take responsibility for their own actions. And where there's blame, there's a claim. Yeah, absolutely, dead right. Nigel Williams, if someone says I need to wear hard hat and glasses in the cab, then I'm out. Just not happening. I will abide by the glasses rule if I have the front window open, begrudgingly, but I'm too old to play silly games with stupid people. You're absolutely right. I always wear my seatbelt, says Steve Williamson, and have had other ups saying, why are you wearing it? Why are you wearing it? It just sit on it. I feel snug and comfortable with the seatbelt when on a machine at stupid angles, etc. Keeps you in the seat. Wouldn't drive without wearing it. Why would you? Why would you? I mean, even just looking at the fact that your machine has a seatbelt. That seatbelt has been installed for a reason. The cost of that seatbelt will have been passed on to the customer, i.e. your boss or your employer. And he has paid an extra £100, £200, £500 for the presence of that seatbelt for a reason. It's not there as an ornamental feature. It is there to protect. Dan Cullen's joined this morning. Dan, thank you very much indeed for being here. Happy Saturday to you, my friend. I've got that mindset, do what they ask and wear what I need to wear and have a happy, easy life. But that's just me. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes that is the easiest way, isn't it? I mean, my job obviously is very different, but I do write on behalf of people. And I have this really strange thing. I get people asking me to write for them because of the way I write. And then you get a job with some companies who then want to change every aspect of what it is that you write. Oh, can you write it like this? Can you make it sound more corporate? Can you make it sound more vanilla? But you've employed me because of what I do, and now you're trying to change what I do. Nigel Williams says, Owen Jepson says, Nigel Williams, always go by the client rules. We're just lever monkeys. We know nothing. I'm going to come back to that point in just a second. Peter Haddock says, I think common sense is super important as PPE can be dangerous if, for example, your glasses fog up when trying to do a job like maintaining a machine. Dead right. Common sense. Common sense. I spend a lot of my time on site with a camera in my hand. It is virtually impossible to use a camera and safety glasses. It's not impossible to use it with a hard hat, but while I'm taking photographs and I'm actually using the viewfinder, I generally put my hard hat on back to front because I don't have the peak that gets in the way of the camera. When I finish taking the photograph, I put it back on the other way. Now, it's still protecting my head. Okay, my nose might take a bit of a blow should something fall on my head, but I'm still wearing a hard hat, and yet again, you get exactly the same things. So I want to go back to this one. We're just lever monkeys now. We know nothing. How many times have you arrived on a site and been told, we want you to do this, like this, to do this? And you've looked at it with all your years of experience and thought, that's not the best way. That's not the most productive way. That's not the safest way. It's not the most efficient way. What you're asking me to do is not right. I could do this faster, more safely, and yet somebody on a piece of paper has said you will do this thing like this. Have you ever encountered that? Because I know I have. Dan Cullen says, I was once told to wear hat, glasses, and fire retardant boiler suit in a machine on a job, and couldn't have the sleeves rolled up. After a day in 25-degree heat, I walked out. There's no aircon in the machine, and was too much to deal with. I've had that as well. We took a photograph of a guy on a site who was, I think he was working on the machine. I'm trying to remember exactly what the circumstances were, but I think he was working on the machine, so sort of checking it over and everything else. And he had high-vis, hard hat, glasses, gloves, everything else, but he had his shirt sleeves rolled up because it was a hot day. That's not right, apparently. Oh, okay. So just suffer the heat then. Is that a good idea? I don't think so. As somebody that's actually passed out through sunstroke, Not a good idea at all. When I'm driving on a machine on a big site, they have to put so many safety barriers around. It's becoming dangerous avoiding them. It's getting so out of hand. I don't really want to work on big sites anymore. I'm fed up with it all. Excuse me, another slurp. This goes back to one of the points that I made yesterday. It comes up in the column that I've written for Monday morning. I wonder if there is scope for us to go back to square one and reconsider how we schedule works. And the example that I've been making, let's relate this to house building. It's not my area of expertise by any means, but I bought a house off plan once, and I saw how it was built and the sequence that went with it. So I lived in what at the time was a cul-de-sac. It was ultimately opened up, but I lived in a cul-de-sac. So how about you put the ground workers at one end, and they do their bit with their heavy equipment, and they gradually move along the road. And as they're moving along the road, i.e. the groundworks are moving away, so the heavy equipment is moving away, you then have the frame erectors, the plasterers, the painters, the decorators, the landscape gardeners following on behind. But the two don't cross over. So groundworks at one end and the other trades at the other end. You've then got no need for things like pedestrian walkways because the heavy equipment is all up one end, and the only people working around those are the people that are involved in that operation. And while I was writing this, I actually thought about this from a wider perspective. And again, going back to my more specialist field of demolition, we often hear that demolition contractors are required to do a job on a bit of a hurry up. You know, they were told that they had a month to do their job, but they're now told that they need to condense it into 2 weeks because the piling contractor is coming. And I have also been on projects where the demolition contractor and the piling contractor are working side by side. Piling contractors have, and rightly, piling contractors have no understanding of the risks and the hazards involved in demolition, much the same way as demolition contractors have no understanding of the risks and the hazards within the piling industry. So why are we working them side by side? And I think a lot of this goes back to the role of the client and the role of the main contractor, their refusal to say no and their insistence on doing everything in a hurry. And that doing everything in a hurry surely leads to shortcuts and surely leads to accidents. And one of the bugbears that I have with all of these things is when there is a prosecution, somebody is hurt or killed or whatever it might be, and there is a prosecution, it is usually the contractor involved that gets the blame. Has anybody ever looked and said, well, you know, we as a demolition contractor said that we wanted 6 weeks to do this project, but you wanted it done in 3? Has anybody ever actually passed the blame up to the client or to the main contractor and said, you have deliberately condensed the amount of time, you have forced the demolition contractor into making shortcuts? And going back to the example that came up earlier about dermatitis, we provide, you know, we as a demolition contractor provided you with a schedule. You halved it, therefore that is your problem, surely. Al Grierson says, sunburn is a perfect example. How often do you see people on holiday running around bright red? People don't understand risk and will do stupid things if they are not continuously reminded not to be idiots. What a sad indictment on the species, eh? Dan Cullen, I have a habit of wearing a seatbelt and the others on site don't. I can't see why they can't. If you automatically put it on when you jump in a car, of course you do. Of course you do. Fraser Skeen is here as well. Fraser, good morning. Let me give you... when I can remember where I've put it, there you are. As a newcomer, I think you're a newcomer anyway. I wish I'd kept a register of these things because I can never remember who's here for the first time and who isn't. But Fraser Skid says, only time I don't wear a seatbelt on machine is a roller. It's very uncomfortable when you need to get the area you need to compact. I understand that, and I mean I would question with that. Let me just get back to where I was. There are instances a roller is a very good example, because with a roller, particularly if you're on asphalt and that kind of thing, you need to see both sides of the drum. And a seatbelt isn't particularly practical for doing that. You've got to get over here and then you've got to go over there. The other example that I would give, and I think this is where we have a major shortfall, is on site dumpers. Because site dumpers, I think people that are operating site dumpers tend to be on and off and on and off and on and off. And I think because of the way we're operating now, we've almost made it sensible for an operator to just fasten the seatbelt on a site dumper and then sit on it. There's got to be a better way, and maybe the switch to cab dumpers is the way forward. Thank you very much indeed. It's a knitted bobcat hat. It's very smart indeed. I don't suppose he's watching, but it was a gift from our friend David Frodel over at Bobcat, and I'm wearing it with some pride. Let's have a look. Steve Williamson. Steve Williamson. If you start speaking back to safety and start disagreeing, just say you're making it harder for yourself. Yeah. And yet, this is something we come back to a lot, and it's something we were talking about the other day with grandfather rights. We have an industry full of very experienced people that have been there, done it, got the T-shirt. They should be involved. And I've got a perfect example of this. I was on a demolition project, an explosive demolition project, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I guess. There was a tower block, about 20 stories, I suppose, up in Scotland. There was no houses around 90% of it. It was a field, and they set the charges to make sure that the building fell away from the houses that were there. But obviously they wanted to protect themselves, so they brought in some shipping containers and some hay bales as well to catch any fly rock that might go over and maybe break a window or something like that. But there was still a bit of concern about, those really little bits of rock that might actually make it through. And there was talk about erecting barriers and all this kind of thing. And one of the excavator operators, who had been in the game for 30 plus years, said, why don't we just get some Monoflex, put it onto a scaffold pole, put the scaffold pole in the gutter of the house so that we've got a screen in front of the house that catches those tiny bits. They were talking about spending thousands to protect those windows. They ended up spending a few hundred. It worked perfectly. Bob's your uncle. And it worked perfectly because they actually asked somebody that had been there and done it before. Gary Muirhead, not doing your daily machine check and walk around is just as bad as not wearing PPE. It is. Tim Gosden, when I was working for Balfour Beatty, I got told off for having a radio in the cab. How stupid. Funnily enough, this was a thing that Mick Norton mentioned a day or two ago, that there is a contractor now that has had not just told to turn the radio off, they have actually disconnected the speaker that is fed by that radio. So you literally can't drive with music playing. It's nanny state in my mind. And I just to be absolutely clear, I'm not for one moment suggesting we should take a more relaxed attitude to safety. I just think safety needs to be applied more specifically. Going back to my earlier analogy, if you are the first on site for a new house build and you're in a field in the middle of nowhere, you do not at that point require a hard hat. You do not, because nothing is going to hit you on the head. A bit later in the job, when plant starts to arrive and you've got things working overhead, dandy, get the hard hat on and keep the damn thing on. But at the time you arrive, possibly as a site engineer actually laying out the site, why in God's name are you wearing a hard hat? Because nothing is going to hit you on the head. Gary Muirhead says, what does Gary Muirhead say? I once had a guy who would always walk up the blind side, and I said to him one day, it'll hurt not me, it'll not hurt the machine, it'll hurt you, keep clear. You would think that would be all it would take, wouldn't you? Just to say that to somebody. And if they don't get that, then I don't know. It just seems crazy to me. Dan Cullen, I hear you, Tim Gosden. Steve Williamson says, you'll like this live chat every day-ish at 10 a.m. Oh, yes, every day. Oh, every day. Idiot. I woke up this morning from a deep slumber and thought, I'm doing it again. I can't believe it. Jim Turner, I don't mind all the silly hoops we have to jump through, but what really gets my goat is when double standards are involved. We're barred from wearing shorts on the site in the height of a red-hot summer, so I agreed but warned the site manager if a woman came on site with her legs showing, I'd be at work in a frock the next day. There's a mental picture I could have done without, and told him he'd have to explain to his directors and the client why they had a 20-stone cross-dressing digger driver. Awesome. Steve Williamson, Fraser Screen is my best man. Good lad. Good lad, but useless. I don't believe that for one moment. Dan Cullen, it's unbelievable. Seemed very close call on demo site between a piling operative and a demo machine. He was walking around like a clueless chicken. Ended up he was on a high and had consumed drugs while at work. As someone he offered to grasp him, and he failed the test, and he wasn't allowed to drive off site. Personal responsibility. You arrive on a site, be it construction or demolition, where you are surrounded by machines that weigh upwards of 20, 30, 40 tons, that would flatten you like a pancake, and you take it upon yourself to do that off your tits on drugs. You're not thinking it through, people, are you? You're really not. In my opinion, demo and piling contractors shouldn't be on the same site. No, they should. I'm going to do a slight aside here, and this goes to show how the lack of joined-up thinking. I was on a demolition project in London. It was actually in Leicester Square, in the heart of London. And the demolition contractor was talking about the fact that they had they'd brought on site some very fancy dust, noise, and vibration monitoring systems that they had all around the site. And those modules fed back to the site office, but they also fed back to, I think it was Westminster Council, so that Westminster Council could monitor the noise, the air, the noise, the vibration, and the dust remotely. For reasons I won't bore you with, I had to go back about 6 weeks later. The demolition contractor had left, but those modules were in place. And I said, I see you stuck with those. And the piling contractor said, no, we didn't stick with them. The demolition contractor packed up and took that all with them, and then we had to get it again. Would it not have made more sense for somebody to say, we need dust, noise and vibration monitoring throughout the project? We'll install it once and we'll leave it there until the project is over. Would that not have made sense? Fraser Skeen, we're on a site. If you get caught without the correct PPE, you C17 and charge £70. Shouldn't be that. I'm just going to say a very quick goodbye. Sorry, Mark, need to leave. Really interesting discussion. Thanks, and have a good Saturday. Jenny thanks, Jenny. I actually thought you were somebody else. Jenny, thank you very much indeed for being here anyway. And I do realise that these shows do interrupt your weekend, so not a problem. You go and do what you need to do. I think that's a dumper. A dumper could be better off having a pullback bar, a bit like on a fairground ride. That would stop the controls from working and less engaged. That way it's quicker, easier than a seatbelt and can't be abused like a seatbelt can. Absolutely right. Nigel Williams. Do you know what I love about this? I think I said about 3 sentences at the very start of the show, and then everything else has just been me reading your stuff. It's way easier this way. Nigel Williams, funny, hey? They want to take the radio out of the machine but forget the existence of Bluetooth speakers and phones. All they're doing is encouraging breaking of the rules through heavy-handed tactics and enforcement. I did wonder about that, actually, and I do realise Bluetooth speakers are a thing, but I just don't see the sense. And carrying that on Bluetooth speakers and phones. I know there are some sites that take a very, very strict stance on the use of mobile phones. I understand that. As somebody that has had his collar felt for driving with a phone in his hand, it was about 3 miles an hour, and I was approaching a roundabout, and I realised that was wrong, and I got fined for it. So I've paid my dues and everything else. I realise they're a distraction, but you also have a life. What if your wife goes into labour? What if one of your children is hurt at school? What if your mother takes ill or has a fall? You'd kind of want to be aware of that, would you not? And having your employer dictating that you must not, under any circumstances, answer your telephone while you're at work. Wouldn't happen in an office. I've worked in plenty of them. Nobody ever told me I wasn't allowed to take a personal phone call while I was at work. So the moment you put on a hard hat, you become a risk to society because you've got a phone in your hand. And you must therefore be cut off from your friends and family. Really. Gary Muirhead, your safety responsibility on site is for you and your colleagues and everyone around you. Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. Fraser Skeen says, only problem we have on our site is dust suppression, and they don't even care. But if you move a barrier, the whole site needs a risk assessment. Risk assessments. We've assessed this, and there is a risk. Wow. Well, thanks for that. I've assessed this open manhole, and somebody could fall down it. It goes back to the point I was making yesterday. When you go to a supermarket and you see those little yellow A-frame barriers out, warning that the floor is slippery or wet. Somebody has had to go to the back office of the supermarket to fetch that frame. Would they not have been better off bringing a mop with them and addressing that situation? Much the same as you see cars burnt out, stolen, abandoned by the side of the road that have blue and white tape over them saying police aware. Well, a police officer, or possibly two, have gone out to put that tape on the car. Would it not have been an idea to go in a tow truck and move the damn thing at the same time? Would that not be an idea? Gary Muirhead, you see bricklayers on site with a radio, you don't see it affecting their work or safety. Yeah, of course you do. Of course you do. Every trade. As I say, I bought our previous house off plan. So, we were living in our house, but the house next door and the one after that was being built. Every trade had their own plaster and paper covered radio blaring till all hours, because that's how you work. I've got music playing in my ears now. If I was writing on the other computer right now, there would be music playing. Nigel, come on now. Nigel Williams says, ultimately what has to happen is that people behave professionally and appropriately. These rules come about from people who abuse the status quo and flout the rules, I'm afraid. There was talk a while back, I'm probably going back, I reckon I'm going back about a decade. And there was talk that the Health and Safety Executive were considering a scheme, and I think they borrowed it from Sweden or Norway or somewhere more sensible than we are here. And the system was known as earned autonomy. In other words, if you as an industry pulled your big boy trousers on and really started to be safer, then they would focus less upon you. You would earn a degree of autonomy. The Health and Safety Executive would still send out inspectors. They would still check that what you were doing and making sure that you were safe. But rather than continually targeting you, you would have earned a degree of autonomy. And yet, we have failed to do that. I safety-wise, and looking more specifically at fatalities, we've got the number of fatalities within demolition and construction down to about 30 to 40 per year. And that seems to be where it's bottomed out. It's like we can't break through the barrier. Owen Jepson says 100% Nigel Williams. I find myself agreeing with an awful lot of what Nigel says. New laptop seems to be working. Fantastic quality. Amazing. Just for those that weren't here for the previous outing of this arrangement, new laptop. There's a new MacBook Air sat on my desk, and I'm actually talking to that there. It's an iPhone. Got an iPhone shooting in 4K, clipped to the top of my my laptop screen, and that is how we will be broadcasting from Las Vegas and other places as well. And I have to say, I'm really quite pleased with it. I wish it was a little bit higher, but I can sort that out. But apart from that, I think it looks pretty damn fine. Jim Turner, a lot of times on housing developments, they make a big deal about Amber Beacon not working, but put the site car park at the back end of the job, so all the cars have to drive past the working plant. Poor planning even before the site has started. Yeah. Beacons. Let us consider a while. Beacons. We have beacons on machines now that alert the site manager to the fact that somebody is or is not wearing their seatbelt. Would that be necessary if the site manager actually left his site office every once in a while and engaged with the people that are in his duty of care? And at the same time, if he did leave his site office to engage with those people that are in his duty of care, would we have quite so much bullying? Would we have quite so much drug and alcohol abuse? Would we have quite so many mental health issues if the site manager were to leave the paperwork behind and go and actually engage with the people that are doing the job? Just saying. Earned autonomy, hey? I really like that idea. As someone who rattles around the country saving hires and lighting fires, I've had hundreds of site inductions, just no need for me to do more than basic site orientation. Yeah. Let's be honest, Nigel. You could do that yourself, couldn't you? You know, if you arrived on site and for one reason or another, the health and safety guy or the safety guy responsible for the site wasn't there, you could induct those people and tell them how to do it and do it properly. You've earned that right. You've been there, you've done it, you've got the t-shirt, you've probably got about 15 bloody cards that prove it. You could do that yourself. So why are you having to go through all of that palaver? And Jepson says, me and Nigel Williams are always on the phone to each other when stuff goes wrong. One of the things I've really enjoyed about the WhatsApp group is the fact that people do that. There's a lot of venting, but there's also a lot of shared information as well. I think that's a fantastic idea. Steve Williamson, 27 days and 5 hours mark. Not that I'm keeping track. No, me either. I really am. Really, literally, I'm bearing in mind if it's 27 days and 5 hours for us. It's 26 days and 5 hours for Peter Haddock, who is in the chat still. Peter says, Mark, hire firms now have systems that automatically report on seatbelt usage to clients. Yeah. Who is that for? Has that reporting system made the operator safer? Has that made the site safer? Or does that just, if anything does happen, does that merely cover the rear end of the client or the main contractor? I know what I think. Tim Gosden says, talking of beacons, I had a third beacon on a JCB I was driving recently. It was purple. Don't know what it was for. Now, it's possible that there is a degree of colour blindness here, so allow me this. I was talking to Ollie Guns a couple of days ago, day before yesterday, and he said he'd been on a machine and he had a blue one, and he didn't know what it was for either. Are we going to go through the rainbow? How much roof space is going to be required for all of these beacons? Gary Muirhead says, a big pet hate of mine is seeing other operators with dirty windows. How are you meant to do your job safely in property when you can't see out? I hate dirty windows. That's a t-shirt waiting right there, I think. Funnily enough, we were on a site up with CJ Charlton up in Edinburgh a couple of weeks back. And the high reach operator, I wanted to get some photographs of him in the cab and everything else. And he said, well, I've just finished a session. We've got dust suppression in the air, concrete dust falling down. I need to clean the windows. So I thought, wow, a couple of minutes. I think I was there for about 40 minutes while he cleaned the windows. Yeah, you do need to see what you're doing. Nigel Williams says the purple ones are for active, height, and slew restrictor. Thank you very much. But the blue one? Is there a blue one, or is somebody just saying blue and purple are the same thing? I honestly don't know. Nigel Williams says, Peter Haddock, that's all part of the telematics, and they use that data for a number of reasons, including the idling times. They absolutely do. And idling times, I know this is going slightly off at a tangent, but man alive, when you actually sit down and look at some of that data, obviously, I've been, just going to clarify that. There we are. Blue can be the same, yeah. I've been to see the LiveLink setup with JCB, and I know Peter spent quite a bit of time there. And when you see that, and particularly when you think about the cost of diesel these days, when you see the hours and the litres of fuel that is being burnt just idling, just ticking over, waiting for somebody to do a thing. I understand the backlash against electric machines. I realise that the grid is at capacity. I realise that not all electricity is green. I realise that it goes against the way that we normally fuel machines, i.e. in this industry, the fuel goes to the machine doesn't go to... I understand all of that. But if there is one thing that electric machines have over every other type of machine is when you stop, it stops. There is no tick over. There's no idling. There is no further fuel usage. You stop, it stops. There is no draw on that battery at all. Tim Gosson said, "Oh, okay, thanks, Nigel. As it had an X watch on it, yeah, that will be it." Idling time is a big one. Yeah, I mean, you can literally see pound notes flowing out the machine while you're doing that. The blue was to be used for lifting using an SLI on the RRVs on the railway. Yeah, that's the one. We have them on hundreds of the X-Watch machines. There you are. If anybody would like to find out more about LiveLink, go and have a look at the video from Mr. Haddock. It's an astonishing thing. Funnily enough, the last couple of times I've been up to JCB, the new machines, particularly the hydrogen machines, very exciting to see and everything else. But what happens in that LiveLink centre is astonishing. When you see the big map, the fact that they're monitoring, I think at last count it was 250,000 machines literally across the world, and the fact that they can spot potential faults remotely. They did give an example at a press conference. This was related to a generator that seemed to be using an awful lot of fuel, and I think it was somewhere like the Bahamas or Barbados or something like this. And there had been complaints from the customer that the generator seemed to be using rather more fuel than they'd anticipated. So they tracked it by LiveLink, and that it was basically at a hotel resort, and it was primarily there to power the lights for the tennis court. So first thing in the morning, it would come on to put the floodlights on to illuminate the tennis courts, and then obviously the sun would come up, so that thing would just tick over for the rest of the day, and then at 6-7 o'clock in the evening, when it started to get dark, it would fire up again and produce more power to switch the floodlights back on. And all they needed to do was to go at 7 o'clock in the morning, okay, the sun's up, switch it off, and their fuel bill went through the floor, as you would expect. So telematics are the future. And just on that subject, obviously we've got our Tech Foresights podcast now, which is now 4 episodes in. The fourth one actually drops on Monday for our non-patrons. Our patrons have already got it, but our non-patrons get that on Monday. And it's about artificial intelligence. And Nigel Williams, this is the one that you and I spoke about 3 weeks ago. I finally got it down and done. Monday morning, you'll be able to hear that. But also, if you like all things tech related in this industry, then go and check out Content with Media over on YouTube. Peter Haddock has an astonishing back catalogue of tech related videos, and not only tech related. Obviously, he's been up at the Exec Hire show this week, looking at all the innovations. I've got to admit, I ducked out in the end. They were coming so thick and fast that I couldn't keep up with them. I watched 2, and then I watched another one, and then I realised there was about another 12 that I hadn't seen. And there's only so many hours in the day. I will get down to those at some point, and I will also be checking out From the Seat of the Cab when Nigel Williams drops his latest episode. Looking forward to hearing that. We did have a chat last night, actually, on our WhatsApp group. Steve Williamson was asking about podcasts. There are plenty. I'm fairly sure the Aaron Witt one is called Dirt Talk. I'm not entirely sure, but there are plenty out there should you decide to go and have a listen. Obviously, I would recommend my own, Demolition News Radio. You can listen to that on any good podcast platform or any poor one as well, actually. And you can also ask your smart speaker to play it for you. But there's also a podcast from Concept with Media. Very good it is too, From the Seat of the Cab by Nigel Williams. There's plenty out there if you fancy. Obviously, there's not the two-way interaction that we have on a show like this, but if you like listening to chat about the industry, you can certainly go and find it. It's readily available. Nigel Williams says, I can't say too much, but I'm working on something with telematics and our journey to net zero 40. Now you have me intrigued. You see, you're playing the game like I do. There's a new episode coming. Mystery. See, that's how you build anticipation, you see. Algorithms, depending on how telematics are dealt with, you're also going to have people gaming the system to not get shouted at. Reduce idling time by tracking the machine forward every 10 minutes and doing a 360. Knowing the industry that we work in, yeah, we will. For every system that's put in place, there is somebody out there that will find a way around it. Peter Haddock says, he says something. I can't get it to play. There we go. Peter Haddock. Been listening to the Tech Ones on Demolition News. Thank you very much indeed, Peter. I have to say they are very enjoyable, and I would say even more. The one that drops on Monday was a real pleasure to do. It's on artificial intelligence, and without giving the game away too much, not only am I talking about artificial intelligence, but I'm using artificial intelligence in order to talk about it. All will become clear on Monday, unless you're a patron, in which case you can hear it already. But yeah, it was a really enjoyable one, taking a step back from our usual fare, just to look at artificial intelligence, which, as you know, Peter will, I'm sure, will back me up on. It is the very foundations upon which machine learning and machine autonomy and even a degree of remote controls is based. And it was surprising to me when you think about the amount of AI that we already accept within our lives. I've said about sort of smart speakers, so Alexa and the others, all of those are based on those kind of things. But you think about some of the systems you have in the cab of a machine, some of that is already harnessing AI, you just don't know about it. I already understand the AI element. I'm sure you do. I know you've been watching it as much as I have. There is a system out there. Funnily enough, it's one of those great minds think alike. I've been playing with a thing called ChatGPT around about November time last year. When it's November, December, can't remember, but one of those. And it's basically, to my mind, yes, it is artificial intelligence. I wonder if it is going to end up being the next generation of internet search. So as it stands at the moment, if you ask Google for a thing, it will give you a whole bunch of answers, and then the onus is upon you to dig into those answers and select the ones that you think best suits your requirements. ChatGPT will give you an actual answer. And to give you, I mean, I'm partly giving the game away here, but one of the things I asked it to do while I was playing with it was to write a script for a YouTube video on the launch of a backhoe loader. Now, bearing in mind, you'd think very specialist subject and everything else. I didn't have to change a word. I didn't use it because I didn't need it. I was just doing it for the purposes of play. But man alive, this thing covered all. I mean, it literally starts. Hi, welcome to the latest video. In this video, we're going to talk to you about the latest JCB hydrogen backhoe loader that's set to revel. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So yes, I've harnessed a degree of that for the AI show that comes out on Monday. Steve Williamson got a great message rather from Hudig. Wanted me to come and have a go on their system, take some videos and pics and meet the crew. So I'm buzzing with that. Always wanted to try one of them out. Awesome. You see, Steve, this is what happens. This is what happens when you become an influencer, my friend. And that is why I was urging you last night to start your own podcast. Be a rival to Nigel Williams. Keep him on his toes. AI is great, Mark, and I think particularly for safety, there's so much that AI can be applied to, and even things like, I mean, we've been talking about people not wearing seatbelts and stuff. AI can sort that out. There, you can put an AI system in the cab that will basically stop that machine from working, or do an audio reminder that people need to wear their seatbelts and so on down the line. The possibilities are endless. Peter Haddett says Safety Shield is a great lead safety solution, Mark. There's a video here. See, I told you he had a big back catalogue. Whatever I say, he's got a video for it, and you can find all of those over in the chat. Nigel Williams says Peter, the Safety Shield AI technology is just fantastic when you get to use it on the machine. I've had it on diggers, loading shovels, and ADT. What a great piece of tech utilizing the cameras to recognize humanoids. And that, if anybody from Safety Shield is watching this, you can send Nigel Williams £500 for having plugged your product and having said how fantastic it is. No? Nobody from Safety Shield in the chat, but there you are. It is a thing. Is there such a thing, says Steve Williamson, when leveling ground for roads or anything else? Is there a roller that can use technology to roll the area you level on its own using GPS? Yes, there is. I'm sure this isn't unique, but I'm sort of outside my comfort zone, but I'll tell you now, while I was over at Balmer talking to the folks at XCMG, they have precisely that. They refer to it as the hub. So they're talking more specifically about sort of asphalt paving, although, you know, the technology applies. So an asphalt paver will go over an area, and 1, 2, half a dozen rollers following behind that will be told by the asphalt paver where to roll, how much to roll, when to stop rolling, and those machines are autonomous. There is no operator. All of that is led by the center of the hub, which is the asphalt paver up ahead. That technology exists right now. It was interesting yesterday or the day before to see the news that JCB has been granted permission to run its hydrogen backhoe loaders on British roads. Hats off to JCB for getting that passed, and look forward to seeing that happening in due course. But one of the things that occurred to me with this is a conversation, and again, we have a video on this. You go over to YouTube and search for XCMG, or search for Demolition News and then search for XCMG. I did an interview with one of their really, really smart guys. And he was talking about the fact that there is currently a bit of a gap in terms of technology. So in China, you can effectively run an autonomous machine pretty much anywhere. So with the hub system that I was talking about, if they are laying a road, they can put the asphalt paver on it, half a dozen rollers behind it, they will follow, and the Chinese authorities have no issue with that. In Europe, the situation is different. In America, the situation is different. There are some states, having spoken to Built Robotics, and that was the first episode, I think, of Tech Foresights, which you can find over on YouTube. In the states, there are some states where they have allowed the use of autonomous machines within guidelines, not roaming around city centres and that kind of thing, but they have allowed it. Here in Europe, I think there's a few pockets in places like Germany where autonomous machines are currently permitted, but not many others. That needs to be the next step, and I do think, when you start to talk about AI, and it's something I mentioned in the podcast that drops on Monday. AI is a fantastic tool, but we need that tool to work for us rather than working for itself. And I think a lot of that is going to require quite a lot of complex legislation and regulation to make sure that we are using it in the safest and best way possible. Peter Haddock says, "I'll let them know, Nigel. One opportunity to do a video on." See, we are fueling collaboration right here. A three-way between Peter Haddock, Safety Shield, and Nigel Williams. Would love to see that. Steve Williamson, bloody awesome. Yeah, it really is. It really is. The stuff is out there. Nigel Williams, not his own just yet. We're nearly there, but currently available is the compaction tech operated, completely autonomous, isn't yet available on the UK market. No, it's not. One of my predictions for the year is that we will see, at long last, the arrival of XCMG. They are the third biggest construction equipment manufacturer in the world, and yet they have no presence in the UK market whatsoever. I predict that will end at some point this year, at which point maybe we start to see this kind of thing. There are trials of the train technology with following machines going a lot now. Great idea. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, if you are of the if you grew up watching Terminator movies and stuff, there will always be concern. What if these things become self-aware? What if Skynet takes over? What if a machine runs amok? It can be controlled and governed and legislated and regulated. Steve Williamson, I have a question I've never heard a proper answer for. What are the regulations for towing a trailer that has brakes and lights with a duck? Nigel Williams, I'm looking at you at the moment. Abroad, they're allowed, but what about the UK? As the UK are just ridiculous for things like this. Can't look to other countries and see how they're years in front and far more advanced than us. Germany was an eye-opener. Yeah, always amazes me the differences, and I know, again, going back to my area of expertise, such as it is, when you see a high-reach excavator being built or being modified, the different regulations and hoops that it has to jump through. So here, we might take a high-reach rig with the counterweight, the boom, and everything else in 2, 3, 4 loads. You get to Italy, that'll be 10. Maybe narrower roads and that kind of thing, weight restrictions on the roads. There are differences all over the place. But if anybody can answer that question, what are the regulations for towing a trailer that has brakes and lights with a rubber duck on board? If anybody can answer that question. We're already over the hour, so I guess that will have to be done off air, unless somebody can come through very, very quickly. Couple of very quick reminders while we're hoping and waiting for somebody to come up with a sensible answer on that. Obviously no show tomorrow because tomorrow is Sunday and I will be at church. I will not be at church because I will probably burst into flames if I set foot in a church, but I will be back here on Monday. Not only will I be here for the Breakfast Show on Monday, but as I've already mentioned, our latest Tech Foresights episode about AI will drop as well. On Wednesday evening, 7 p.m, we are going to be talking car park demolition. I'm going to be joined on the show by Mike Keogh of C&D Engineering Consultants, who is an absolute expert in the field. So that's the plan for that. And then, we've got a whole week full of Breakfast shows. And other stuff as well. And then, as I can't remember the exact figures, but as Steve said, we are now building up to Las Vegas, and we will be broadcasting. I will literally be able to say live from Las Vegas. I may not use that voice, but a question posted about 3 months ago to the DVSA. I will let you know, says Nigel Williams. Thank you very much indeed. Gary Muirhead, enjoy the rest of your weekend, Mark. And guys, you too, Gary. An absolute pleasure having you here, as is always the case. Steve Williamson, and the scary thing is, with being in the UK, someone will do something stupid with a duck and trailer, and that will just fuck it up for everyone else. Someone in an office will ban it. I think I need to move abroad. Don't do that, Steve. No, feel free to do that, but still tune in, eh? you'd be sorely missed if you weren't here. Right, people, go and have a good weekend. I'm going to, I don't know what I'm doing today, actually. But going to go and drink what's left of my cold cup of tea, and I'll make it up as I go along after that. But until then, everybody, have a great weekend. Really look after yourselves. See you again on Monday if you're available. All the links for the various Peter Haddock videos will remain in the chat. So if you're watching on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on YouTube, you'll be able to pick those links up. So if you fancy an afternoon of binge watching Peter Haddock in full flow, you know where to find him. Content with Media over on YouTube. Until then, everybody, have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you all again very, very soon indeed. All the best.